Hi guys, okay, so the base is now dry. What we want to do now is essentially use a nice brush to brush off any of the excess. Right, okay, so once the base is free from any excess sand, if you've used a nice soft brush, that prevents any paint clogging, essentially ready for the undercoat. What I tend to use for undercoat is a nice scenery paint, something like Mechanicus Grey. Give it a nice shake, add a bit of water if you need to, and then essentially we're going to paint the entire base, including the sand. We're going to get into all the sort of the nooks and crannies, and that'll ensure that it ties all the loose particles together, ready for some dry brushing and some ink work, which we'll come to shortly. There you go guys, that's the completed undercoat onto the base, using the standard Mechanicus Grey, using essentially just a medium-sized brush, get into all the nooks and crannies, and now what you want to do is allow that to dry thoroughly before we then apply an ink and then a dry brush. Okay, and we'll come back to that. Welcome back guys. Right, okay, so you've used the standard Mechanicus Grey. It's nice and dry now. You can see on the Mini that actually, you know, there's no sand that's going to be loose on there, which is great. So essentially what we're going to do now is we're going to pick out areas in dry brushing, which is a painting technique, and then apply an ink over the top to basically dull down the colour. But we'll come to that in stages. So just to draw your attention, we've got areas of metal actually on the miniature, and then sort of quite an interesting Primaris Space Marine helmet there with a hole in. Headshot, love it. So we need to kind of avoid those areas and then look to apply maybe sort of a concrete effect on some of the open sort of masonry. So we'll show you how to do that. You will need yourself an Old Faithful. So I use this. This is an extra large basing brush that is now my sort of scenery dry brush from Games Workshop. It's well used, as you can tell, but it's pretty useful. Secondly, we need to have a look at the paint we're going to use. So initially, I'm going to use some Screaming Skull, which I would advise with standard Mechanicus Grey is an excellent dry brush for scenery, for bases, and it gives you a good overall effect. You can then apply some Terminatus Stone, which is essentially a slightly lighter version. It's a dry paint, so it's essentially quite sort of viscous. You apply it onto your brush the majority off, and then you go over the top. So if you want to pick out areas in a slightly lighter dry brush, you can use this afterwards. So without further ado, we'll get on with it. Okay, so on my palette I've got some Screaming Skull, forgot the name of the paint there. Screaming Skull out my palette. I've essentially worked that through my dry brush, like so. Okay, and then I'm going to go to my trusty towel and I'm going to wipe off literally the majority of the paint. So don't mess about with this, get absolutely loads off the brush so it almost looks like it's running clear, because what you don't want at this point is too much paint actually on the base. Okay, so I'm just going to go upside down now and place like so. Try not to ruin my painting pile. And we're going to take a circular motion now around the base, all those sort of sand areas. Circular motion's really good because what it does is it offers a sort of a 360 approach to applying the paint. Once you've gone in one direction, go the other way. It really starts to pick out that detail. If you start to feel like the paint's starting to come off your brush a bit more on your palette, wipe it off. Start again. Nice circular motion, especially around the masonry, because we're going to pick that out in a lighter grey paint afterwards. Like I said before, don't worry about the metalwork too much, okay, which is those areas, we'll come to those. Okay, so starting to come alive now. So let's pick those areas out. I will then show you a process with the Terminator stone, which will really start to pick out the more sort of aligned areas on the miniature. Okay, time to apply the Terminator stone. So on this, I want to really focus on the raised areas, where I'm going to look to essentially apply a slightly lighter dry brush shade. Really make the miniature pop at this stage. Okay, there you go. So we start to see that kind of two-tone effect coming through. Nice and bright. Okay, next we look to apply some colour.